Welcome. We have a lot for you today. Our presentation tonight will be called Harnessing the Healing Power of the Nervous System, Brain, and Heart. And it will be presented by our own Dara Jones, who I have known for 20 years. And I know she's so qualified to give this particular talk. She is quite a researcher and experiencer, for that matter. During a 20-year healing period, a journey that includes Lyme disease, toxic mold exposure, and autoimmunity, Dara earned what her integrative doctor calls, quote, an honorary MD, unquote. While housebound due to debilitating fatigue and acquired brain injury, Dara sought to discover the key to health restoration through a variety of modalities. However, it wasn't until she returned to her Christian roots, following a 25-year spiritual search, that she experienced the true peace of God that surpasses all understanding, turning around her life and health. Dara holds a BBA in economics and marketing, an MBA in finance, and postgraduate completion of organizational development, change management, coaching, and leadership programs. She is the author of Foreign Invaders and an Autoimmune Disease Journey Through Monsanto's World of Genetically Modified Food. It's available for you if you're interested on Amazon. So, without further talking about from me, let's present our Dara.
Thank you, Janice. All right. You may be wondering why we are talking about this and how it relates to our mission here at the New Earth Visioning Project. Well, the reason is because the brain, nervous system, and heart are at the heart of how we show up in the world, who we are, and how we function, really everything about how we function in the world. And we've talked a lot about raising our vibration and staying at a high frequency, and that being one of the keys to for us to accomplish our mission. And really the bottom line of that is, how do we regulate our emotions? So we'll talk tonight about how that relates to the brain, nervous system, and heart, because it is really the key. But these also impact our physical health, our neurotransmitters and mood, our focus and attention, our ability to move forward in life, being relationships, really just everything. And I learned this the hard way. Once I lost the health and coherence of these systems, I was really non-functional in the world. And I learned the hard way also that you can do every technique in the book to regulate your emotions, try to change your thoughts, and just try to do all the things that a lot of us have learned to do. But if you're doing that on top of a dysregulated nervous system, unresolved trauma, an acquired brain injury, or low heart rate variability, which we'll talk about what that is in a little bit, you're going to create inside yourself the opposite of what you want. And that's just going to be futility and frustration, because it's just not going to work in the long run. You can suppress some of that for a while, but in the end, you'll just be spinning your wheels. So let's not spin our wheels. What we want to do is live in harmony and coherence, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. My goal for tonight is, with this vast subject that I love to geek out on, I'm going to keep it at a very high level because, I mean, you could like literally get your PhD in this. It is, and people do. So what I'm going to do is really narrow in on things that we can apply to our lives now. And I want to provide a way for you to understand these systems and recognize in yourself maybe what might benefit you and give you a jumping off point so that you can then learn more about different modalities that we're going to talk about. And I'll be talking about the ones that I used the most and got the most success out of. And then how we can bring ourselves back into harmony. And so I'll just briefly talk about my health journey so that you can get a feel for some of the things that I went through and how I got to where I am now. We'll look at each system at a really high level, what can go wrong and how issues can manifest. But then the good news is that there are ways to heal and stay in harmony and create harmony and coherence in your system. So I'll be talking for a while, and then at the end we will do some writing. We'll do some practices, so you'll get a feel for about 4 different practices and meditation that you can use. And then I'll be providing a lot of resources that Janice will put up on the website so that you can learn more, and it'll just point you in different directions depending on you know, which one of these feels like applies to you. Okay, so my journey. So how did I, a multi-decade veteran of the corporate America, come to know so much about neuroscience? I didn't even like science in school. So I would really only read about the body or science when it came to like, okay, so how do I lose weight? I mean, that was really like the extent of my interest in how the body functioned until I got sick. And after 20 years, I learned that the medical profession really, like, they do their best, but there is just so much that they don't know. And there's very few people that can put it all together, that really have a holistic picture of all the pieces and parts that can go wrong. And mine was a very complex case. And it started exactly 20 years ago this month when I was on a plane going to vacation in London. I felt great when I got on the plane, happy. My ex-husband and I were looking forward to a week running around one of our favorite cities in the world. And by the time I got off the plane, I could barely walk. And I spent the next 7 days in bed while he ran around London. And I got to spend 2 hours in St. James Park the last day. That was all the energy I could muster. And this started many years of chronic fatigue syndrome. And I'd have episodes where it felt like all the energy had been drained out of me. And I would be in bed and I could barely move to get up to go to the bathroom. It was perplexing. I went to lots of doctors. At that time, I didn't really know about holistic and integrative medicine. This was 20 years ago. It was not prevalent the way it is today. So they would do my blood work and say, you're fine. You must be stressed. And so fast forward to 2005, I was then separated from my husband and was under stress and got bitten by a tick and I got Lyme disease, but it went undiagnosed for 5 years. So it wreaked havoc with my immune system. And by 2007, I had thyroid autoimmunity, which almost killed me in 2009. And I won't go into any of the details, but then from 2009 to 2011, I lived in an idyllic, gorgeous cottage out on a horse farm in the country in the beautiful rolling hills of Virginia. I thought I was, doing the best thing for my health, getting out of the city, learning to garden, communing with nature, all my favorite things. But the cottage was full of black mold, hidden in the bathroom that I discovered a year and a half into living there. So that really was like the nail in my health coffin. It just took me down. That was 10 years ago. And that's when I really got serious about research and started digging into everything I could find. And that's that's the time that I started working on my diet, learned about genetically modified foods, and went from doctor to nutritionist. At one point, I counted how many people I had been to, and I quit counting at like 57. I mean, it was ridiculous. And I just never had the heart to add up how much money I spent. I mean, I know it was like way north of $100,000. So, and things would work for a little while, but then I would always lose my progress. I would always go backwards. Something would happen. I'd have like a little bit of stress in my life, and boom, I'd be back to where I started. But it wasn't until 2017 that I learned about the role of the nervous system, and that there was such a thing as an acquired brain injury as opposed to a traumatic brain injury. And around that time, I also learned about the HeartMath Institute, which we'll talk about. So I started experimenting and doing various practices, and got to the point where I was more functional. Like I was doing much better. And like Janice said, just recently, I returned to my Christian roots, and I used to roll my eyes when Christians would talk about being born again. I was raised Southern Baptist, so I know what that's all about, but I really rejected it when I went to college. But I have to say that that's a real thing, and I've experienced it. So I have so much to be grateful for, but I don't think I could have gotten there without what we're going to talk about tonight. So there's just been so many pieces to this puzzle, but I really think that those are the two keys for me. And the things that we're going to talk about tonight, anybody can do. And they're good if you've had, some sort of trauma or injury to the brain like I had, or if you're just trying to deal with chronic stress. So we're going to now just do a high-level overview of the systems, just so that you can see, okay, what are we talking about here? And the brain, we'll start there. So there's three main parts of the brainstem, the limbic system, and the neocortex. And the brainstem is at the back of the neck, and inside the brain. That's really what people that's really the reptilian brain. It's pre-verbal. It gives us our sense of safety. And there's this thing called proprioception that helps you know where you are in space. And that may sound a little weird, but if you don't know where you are in space, then you can't have a sense of safety. You can't be grounded. And this is really going to play into some of the things that we talk about later, especially the meditation that we do at the end. And one of the main things about the brainstem is it's where the cranial nerves connect to the rest of the body. And Mary, who is a cranial sacral therapist, is really the one qualified to talk about this. I won't go into any details of that, but the 10th cranial nerve is really key to our discussion tonight. And that's called the vagus nerve. And that wanders throughout the whole body. And it's involved in many automatic functions. It goes through the lungs, the heart. We regulate body temperature. It goes through digestion. It's very key in swallowing, our social engagement. So it's a real key piece to this. And it can become damaged. You can lose the tone. So there's a lot of things that we can do and to help with that. And there are exercises. There's 2 exercises that we'll do tonight that will also involve the brainstem. Now, the limbic system is where we store our memory. And this is very, very key to our discussion and what we're about in the New Earth Visioning project, because it's the emotional brain. It is responsible for all of our emotional reactions. This is where the amygdala is. You've probably heard of the amygdala and what activates the fight or flight mechanism. The hypothalamus is a part of the limbic system, and that's responsible for all the neurococktails of chemicals and hormones. It's like our built-in pharmacist. And those chemicals and hormones go throughout our body. And so all of our cells have receptors for the chemicals and hormones that we produce. And we can produce, we produce a lot of stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, but we also produce love hormones like oxytocin. So the receptors on our cells get used to and grow according to what the most prevalent kind of chemicals and hormones are that we produce. And those, of course, are controlled by the health of our system, our autonomic nervous system, which is seated in the limbic system, but also our thoughts. And again, we're going to be talking much more about all of this. And now the neocortex, this is really the majority of the volume of our brain. And it's the mammalian, the latest and greatest of the mammalian brain. And it's responsible for really like what makes us human, our language, our creativity, our imagination, our discernment, our perception of sensory processing. The processing itself comes in through the brainstem and is processed in the limbic system, but the perception and the interpretation of that happens in this neocortex. And also, planning, all the complex cognitive abilities that we have happens here. But the thing is that when our stress hormones, our stress response is activated, the amygdala and the fight or flight is activated, the neocortex pretty much just goes offline and the emotional brain takes over. So it's like, have you ever gotten angry and you say things and you do things that later on you say to yourself, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? Well, the fact was you weren't. You were just responding, reacting emotionally out of the limbic system because that takes over, because the body has sensed a threat. And who cares about creativity and imagination when you're being chased by a criminal or a lion or a tiger? None of that matters. You just have to save yourself. So this is something that we're really not going to talk about a lot tonight. We're going to focus on the brainstem and the limbic system, because that's really where you get the most leverage when you're talking about creating the coherence and harmony that we want to create for ourselves. Okay, so the nervous system. Now, the nervous system is very complex. There are many different branches of the nervous system: the central nervous system, the peripheral, the enteric, we're going to talk about the autonomic nervous system tonight, which is just a piece of it. But again, it's a key piece for us because this is where our body either is in sympathetic or parasympathetic. Mary talked about this last time. The sympathetic branch is where our fight or flight response gets activated. And it's preparing the body for some stress-related activity. And it prioritizes our bodily functions for this alert activity. So it could be something like exercise, having sex, giving a presentation. I'm probably not in parasympathetic mode right now. I'm very alert. But this is where you can, where the body gets ready to run, to fight or flee, or be very, very alert to perform a task. And you can see that digestion stops because who cares about digestion? You know, we've got a task to do. So we need the sympathetic nervous system. Like we can't live without it. You can't just live in parasympathetic, which has two functions. And so that has two branches. And I'm only bringing up that it has two branches so that I can be accurate about it. But the stress response includes freeze. So fight, flight, or freeze. And it's actually the older part of the parasympathetic system, and which is really not important for our conversation tonight, but I just want you to know because there's a whole field of study called the polyvagal theory that was really a game changer for me when I learned about the freeze response and what caused it. In me, my nervous system got wired to go into freeze very easily, and then how to get out of it. And that's when the system just gets overwhelmed and you can't fight, you can't flee. And that's when you just freeze, and you've seen animals do that. They just play dead. And so this is not a healthy place to be when it comes to being in healing mode. And it's a result of trauma, especially childhood trauma, which I experienced a lot of. But rest and digest is really the healing mode. And also in this same mode is social engagement. So when we can be with people and read each other's facial expressions and body language. And the vagus nerve plays heavily in this. And this is where we really can have regeneration of our body. Okay, so the heart. This is really one of my favorite areas. When I learned about heart rate variability, I got so excited because I have this heart condition. And so I got really excited about what you can do to impact your heart rate variability, which is just simply the variation between heartbeats. And there's it varies if the heartbeats are close together or further apart. And you wouldn't think that's the case, but it is. And higher variability is better. And the ability to switch gears, though, is really the most important because that's an indication of resilience. And low variability can lead to worsening depression, anxiety. I experienced that for decades. And then, of course, what I just said, the high variability indicates the resilience. And so we can improve this. And since the vagus nerve goes through the heart, this also improves the functioning of the vagus nerve. So we're going to talk about, how you do this. And again, it's one of my favorite parts. And I use it all the time still. And it's very impactful, and you can do it anytime, anywhere. All right, so things can go wrong. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is the good news. So just hang on, because there is really good news. But definitely things can go wrong. And one is that things can just, your nervous system, your brain structure, everything can become structurally changed, rewired, or damaged. And this is through neuroplasticity. The brain can change and adapt, both for the positive and for the negative. So a lot of things can happen. So an acquired brain injury, which I had, can come from chemical, mold exposure, some other kind of environmental exposure, infections, bacterial, viral, again, as opposed to a traumatic brain injury, which can also change the structure of the brain, and as well as PTSD. And then childhood trauma is huge. Unfortunately, that can start in utero, when the fetus is exposed to the mother's stress and the mother's stress hormones. And the Kaiser Permanente out in San Diego did a huge study of about 40,000 people to track the association between adverse childhood experiences or trauma, childhood trauma, and mental and physical health problems later in life. And you can take a test. It's a score from 1 to 10. And they found that if you had a score of 4, and these are like different kinds of traumas and exposures that you had growing up. But a score of 4 or higher pretty much guarantees, I think, at a 90% rate, that you're going to have some issues later on in life. And unfortunately, my score was an 8. So my system was already wired and predisposed for what ended up happening 20 years ago, and probably why it took me so long to come out of it. One of the factors, anyway. So I know that, Mary and Mike are going to talk to us about trauma. I think that's one of the things Janice is going to tell us about. But I did a lot of work around this, and we're going to do a couple of exercises that's just like the start of some of the things that you can do for yourself. But again, you don't have to have had dramatic childhood trauma to benefit from these exercises that we're going to talk about. Let's focus just for a minute on limbic system impairment, because this, again, is the seat of the autonomic nervous system, and the autonomic nervous system controls so many things. It controls our immune system, our detoxification pathways, our digestion, our heart. It controls our mood, inflammation, there's chronic pain. There's all types of things that you can see on this list that can go awry when the limbic system is impaired. And this is just a very tiny sampling. I mean, I have a very long list of potential issues that can happen with limbic system impairment. So it's a really important piece of any kind of healing program, regardless, of any of these that you have. It has big implications. And for me, the way it manifested was big issues in sensory processing. So I was to the point where if I went to the grocery store, which, I had to do every week, I think it was really before the time of all the delivery services we have now, I would be like on the couch for 2 days to deal with coming down from all the stimulation that my body just couldn't process. I couldn't hold focus and concentrate. I had horrible insomnia. I think my amygdala was always triggered. There's this thing called Lyme rage, and I definitely had it. I had social anxiety and like a mild form of agoraphobia where I just didn't even want to leave the house. I had a hard time like going outside and walking my dogs and talking to people. And I had severe depression and anxiety. And I'm sure I'm forgetting because I've done so much work on this that I actually like had to sit down and remember what I went through to tell you just that list. So the good news is that, you know, before I was in this constant trauma loop, where your amygdala and your fight or flight system just gets stuck in a loop. And now I'm to the point where I can't even remember what that was. So there's really good news here. All right, what we can do about it. So I already mentioned neuroplasticity, and this is a real scientific breakthrough because used to be, they believed that your brain couldn't change. Like whatever your brain was doing, that's what you were stuck with. It could be damaged, but it couldn't be fixed. And that's just not the case at all anymore. We know it's absolutely not true. And in 1949, a man named Donald Hebb discovered that neurons that fire together wire together. And again, this can be positive or negative. And you'll hear Joe Dispenza use that phrase a lot. And that's where I first heard it, was from Joe Dispenza. So that's good news because, and we're going to do an exercise later on where we're going to start becoming aware of how our neurons are firing together. What are our neural pathways? And that way we can then start working towards changing those and creating new neural pathways. And there's a lot of modalities that utilize neuroplasticity. In the resources, I'm going to list a wonderful documentary. It's so hopeful, by a name put on by Norman Doidge out of Canada. And he wrote 2 books about how the brain can change itself. And we act back on our brain. So it's really exciting. Again, I can totally geek out on this because it's so cool what we're able to do now, what we know, and how our systems work. One of the things that I used was the dynamic neural retraining system. And that is an intensive step-by-step limbic system rehabilitation program. And it's very, very thorough. It was developed specifically to repair an impaired limbic system. It uses cognitive behavior therapy, mindfulness-based cognitive restructuring, emotional restructuring therapy, NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, incremental training, which is a form of neural shaping, and behavior modification therapy. It's incredible. And it's being used right now to help people with long-haul COVID recover. So if you know anyone that has long COVID, tell them about DNRS because it's really, really helping a lot of people. Then another thing is heart math, which we'll do a very brief heart math exercise later. They have 5 main techniques, and I only just used one of them. I never even learned the other 4 because that one that I learned works so well, and it's so easy. But they have this really cool technology called the Inner Balance Monitor, where you clip it on yourself, and they have an app where you get biofeedback in the moment on your heart rate variability. And are you in coherence or out of coherence? And it gives you this really cool graph. They have a lot of free training. They have coaches. They have a certification program. If you really love it, you can learn how to teach it and to work with people. So it's really amazing. And they've done a lot of research. And they have also what they call the Global Coherence Project. So this should be, Janice, when we get to points of light, this should be on the list, their Global Coherence Project. And then the vagus nerve, which we've talked about, again, I really should refer to Mary on this. She can talk about this at another time, but there's manual manipulation therapy, such as osteocranial sacral work. There's physical therapy type exercises that you can do. And that's if the nerve itself is out of alignment or damaged. There's exercises and devices that can stimulate the vagus nerve. And then breathing and improving heart rate variability, like we talked about earlier, also can improve it. And then somatic exercises. So this is a huge body of work that I'm not even going to really barely touch the surface of this. But it's working directly with the body because it's really engaging the brainstem and helping the body to resolve trapped trauma. And trauma is defined as anything that overwhelms the nervous system, or incidents that make you believe or make you feel like you're going to be seriously injured or your life is at stake. And so the goal of somatic experiencing, which is one type of therapy, is to release the traumatic activation through increased tolerance of bodily sensations and related emotions. Because when people hold this kind of trauma inside, sometimes just bodily sensations are too much for them. They can't process that. Their system is holding so much trauma and this excess energy. And there's a cycle that happens when any kind of stressor happens, especially like when a trauma happens, where you go through these steps, and the last step is the release of the energy. And you've probably seen videos of animals that'll get in a fight and then they separate and they'll both shake. Well, they're releasing that trauma energy because they've just felt like that they were going to die and they were fighting. And so they built up this energy, this traumatic energy, and they release it. But humans very seldom actually go through the whole cycle and release that trauma energy. And so it gets trapped in the body and it stores up. So it causes a lot of problems. But these exercises are also really good for, again, dealing with chronic stress, because you don't have to have been severely go through a very hard trauma to store trauma, because our thoughts, even we can traumatize ourselves by just our thoughts. So we'll just do two very short exercises just to give you just a little flavor of it. But I like these exercises and I did them a lot because they're easy to do. You can do them anywhere. You can even do them while you're driving. Well, one of them, not the other one. You'll see. So anyway, I'll provide more resources in the resource section. And then meditation and breathing. So there are many, many different breathing exercises out there, different counts and, all kinds. Some breathing exercises utilize the sympathetic nervous system. Now, I was never able to do those breathing exercises. And that includes Joe Dispenza's breathing exercise. I can't do his. I mean, maybe I could do it now, but I don't like it because it utilizes the sympathetic nervous system. And my system was always just so stimulated already that I couldn't do that. So the one that I liked the best, the breathing, was just very simple. Again, I like things that I can do anytime, anywhere. And it's just a simple 4 counts in and 4 counts out. And the slower you can do it, the better. But it's just the simplest thing. 4 counts in, 4 counts out. And that just immediately calms down the nervous system. And meditation, many, many different types of meditation. And I tried a lot of different ones. And today we're going to do my favorite one, which is the open focus. And I learned about this from Joe Dispenza, and I learned about him from DNRS because he was one of the sources that the creator of DNRS used to learn about neuroplasticity. And it has a profound effect on both the brain waves and puts you into parasympathetic mode. And it was researched extensively, or is researched extensively at Princeton University. And so it has wide research behind it. They certify people to teach it. So, you know, I really, and for me, my experience with it was profound. You know, I told you how I couldn't go to the grocery store without being completely overwhelmed. The very first time I did open focus, I just did maybe 10 or 11 minutes, which that's what we're going to do today, of a Joe Dispenza meditation. He always starts his meditations with open focus to bring the body into coherence first. And so I just did like 10 or 11 minutes of one. I think it was from You Are the Placebo. And then I went to the grocery store, you know, because I needed to go to the grocery store. And I came home and I put my groceries away. And then I started straightening up the house. And then I started cooking. And like 3 hours later, I realized I had not crashed. I was functioning. It was, I just can't even tell you what a miracle that was. So from then on, I was totally sold on open focus. And then there's other kinds of frequency work. We don't need to go into that, but I'll list them in the resources. I've been talking long enough. Okay, so now we're going to go into the exercises. So, are y'all ready for a break? You don't have to hear me. Well, I am going to talk a little bit to guide you through these 2 little exercises. But then I'm done. That's the presentation. The rest is experiential. But like I said, I was just really skimming the surface to give you guys just a overview of what's available to us in modalities and in the science, the neuroscience, to help us heal and live in harmony and coherence. Now we're going to have 4 exercises, and it's going to be a progression. The first 2, I'm going to walk you through, and they're going to really be brainstemmed based. They're somatic, to create a sense of safety in the body, which is really like the foundation of what we need to do this work. Then we're going to move to the heart and the vagus nerve with a heart math exercise. And then finally, we'll do an open focus meditation. So the first one we're going to do is called Orienting. So get comfortable in your chair and just let your shoulders relax. And we're going to engage the brainstem. So what we're going to do is turn our head all the way to the side. And then I want you to look in your environment and through your senses, just notice what's going on. What is in your room? What's the temperature? What do you smell? Just turn your head and just look very slowly. What do you hear? What colors do you see? Is there any movement going on? And then go all the way over to the other side. So again, you've got your brainstem activated. And then just slowly go back to the other side, doing the same thing. Okay. All right. So now you really have a sense for your environment. Now, next, what we're going to do is called grounding. You've probably done this many times. So with your feet on the floor, and again, just relax your shoulders, sit back in your chair, get relaxed, and bring your attention to your feet. And feel your feet in your shoes if you have them on. Feel them touching the floor. Feel any sensations going on in your feet. You may feel sensations in other parts of your body. But for now, just pay attention to your feet. Okay, next, feel the chair you're sitting in. Feel it underneath you where you're sitting. And how your body meets the chair. Just notice if there's any sensations. Just what that feels like. And then feel the back of your chair, whatever you're sitting in. Feel how your back meets the chair, what it feels like to lean back. Just bring your focus and attention there. Okay, everybody good? Yeah, you done? Yeah, that grounding exercise was actually really important for me because I, through all of my research and experimentation, learned that my attention and focus was someplace up here. It wasn't actually like down in my body. And so I would do this one before I would go into the grocery store. I would get like in my body and bring my attention and energy down to my feet. That really helped anchor me. So this is one that you can do, like if you, because it's normal, especially in today's society with what's going on, to get spun up, wound up. And this is a really, really easy way to just come back in and ground. Okay. Ready to go to the next one? Yeah. Okay, great. So this is a heart math. It's a guided meditation. It's by the president of Heart Math Institute, or she used to be. I don't know if she is now, but she works there. There's some visuals that she provides. So if you want to keep your eyes open, or you can close your eyes. You can do it both ways.
Quick coherence is a simple yet powerful technique that you can use to connect more deeply with your own heart and to connect more with the hearts of others. Let's try it together. First step is to focus your attention on the area of your heart. To shift your focus to the area of your chest or heart and pretend like your breath is flowing in through the area of the heart or chest and out through the area of the heart. Breathe a little more slowly, a little more deeply than you normally do, maybe to a count of 5 in and 5 out, but find a smooth, easy rhythm. Let's do it. Now continue this heart-focused breathing and make a sincere attempt to re-experience a positive or regenerative feeling, like the care or appreciation you have for someone or something in your life. It could be a pet, a time in nature, a special place, an accomplishment, but feel that genuine feeling of love you have for someone, or care or appreciation. Or just focus on a feeling of calm and ease as you continue the heart-focused breathing. Now this technique, quick coherence, is putting your heart rhythms into a more coherent mode, a coherent rhythm, and it has a carryover effect. So as you move into your next activities or connect with someone, you can feel more heart connected, more centered. You can do this simple 1-minute technique anytime, anywhere.
Okay. Now, the next thing we're going to do is 11 minutes of one of my favorite Joe Dispenza's open focus versions. And there's various different types of guidance that different people use. This is his version of it. And it may sound a little weird at first because you're going to be focusing on space, which is something that we don't usually do. We usually have a narrow focus. And this this narrow focus brings us into alertness. And remember, when we were talking about alertness, it's more of a sympathetic activation. This is a diffuse focus. So you're going to be focusing on space, and then different body parts, and then your body parts in space. So it may take a little while to get used to it. It took me a little while to, really get the hang of it. But I've had some amazing experience, like one that was like the first time that I ever used it, that I told you about. But just relax and go with it and just do the best you can. But just let yourself focus on space.
Now, take your time and take one very slow, deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And exhale through your mouth. And feel your body relax. And for a moment, simply become conscious of your breath moving in through your chest and moving out through your chest. And relax. And now, can you become aware of the space that your nose occupies in space? And can you feel the volume of space that your entire nose is in space? And now, can you sense the space that your lips occupy in space? And can you feel the volume of space that your lips are in in space. And can you rest your awareness in the space that your eyes occupy in space? And can you feel the volume of space that your eyes are in? In space. And now, can you notice the space that your entire face occupies in space? And can you feel the volume of space that your entire face is in? In space. And can you feel the space that your ears occupy in space? And can you sense the volume of space that your ears are in space? And can you become aware of the space that your entire head occupies in space? And can you feel the volume of space that your entire head is in space?
Okay, that was just the first 11 minutes. It goes on for 20 minutes. The open focus part. So I just want to take a break here. So get your paper and pens out. It's a great time to do it with our nervous systems, hopefully very relaxed. So what this is designed to do is help us to start building awareness of what our patterns and our neural pathways are, which is really the first step in a conscious neuroplasticity process. And DNRS calls these pathways of the past, POPs, which I worked with a lot. And so instead of a prompt, I just wanted to put some questions out there, and you can write about any of them or all of them. But we're really looking for kind of like, where are your loops, repetitive thoughts, repetitive responses to stress triggers? Or look at the triggers, like what is it that pulls you out of harmony and creates discord? Makes your heart rate go up? What makes you mad? What gets you spun up? Another thing to look at is kind of how your nervous system is wired, like kind of like what I was talking about earlier. I was really wired to go into freeze. And so to like really look at, okay, how does that work? What's that mechanism? And then another thing that Joe Dispenza likes to say is, where energy goes, attention flows. So where is your attention when you're under stress? And kind of like, what's your pattern? So just, write about kind of what you're feeling right now, what you're thinking about these things, and we'll take about 5 minutes or so. Okay, so just start wrapping up whatever thought you were working on. Okay, so this week, you can keep working on the writing exercise, but of the patterns and the neural pathways that you identified during the writing exercise, pick one or two, just, not 10, but just one, maybe two, and catch yourself when you do it, and then interrupt it and redirect it, because remember, the neurons that fire together wire together. So if you're in one of these patterns or neural pathways, you want to interrupt it, stop it, and then you can focus on something different. So like something that you can just laugh, you can, I don't know, go out in nature, do something different, dance around the house, but just focus on something different to stop it and get yourself in a different state. And then replace that thought or reaction with your desired response. And that way you can start creating a new neural pathway. And what happens is if you keep doing that over and over and over again, you interrupt and redirect, interrupt, redirect as often as you can catch yourself, then you start creating this new pathway. And the old one does what's called pruning. It just goes away because it's not connecting and firing together. So neurons that don't fire together don't wire together. So you just need to pick one or two, again, keep it simple so that you can focus on it and interrupt that one over and over and over again. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is to choose one practice that we discussed and work with it this week. And it can be one of these ones that we did. We talked about a lot of different things. It may be something that you already are doing, but just pick one. And Mike, this kind of really speaks to what you were saying, just one. And that way, again, you're creating a new neural pathway, a new habit, a new pattern. And that's really the key. You need to create that. And it doesn't happen overnight. So with neuroplasticity, it takes repetition over days, weeks, months, just consistency to recreate and prune away the old ones and create new ones. And then you can do some more journaling about what you learned today, next steps that you think you want to take. Maybe you just want to pick up something that you are already working on, try something new, but really, like we were doing in the writing exercise, just continue to create awareness of, your patterns and how you respond to outside stimuli, what's going on inside you, what you're thinking, that sort of thing. So that's it. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for your attention. It was a lot of talking. I appreciate you listening and being here tonight.